Bé, bon dia a tothom, les persones que hi ha a la sala, les persones que ens escolten des de streaming. Estem en aquesta segona jornada del tercer curs d'estiu sobre les agendes d'autonomia estratègica, democràcia i energia. I avui parlem d'un dels temes que crec que és dels més importants des del punt de vista del manteniment de la democràcia a Europa. És la democràcia i la desinformació. Agrair al CIDOB i al Parlament Europeu per donar-nos aquesta oportunitat d'estar debatent una de les qüestions que està més en boga últimament en tots els debats democràtics. Aquests dies suposo que tots els que esteu aquí sou conscients que el que s'anomena la postveritat, la mentida, les fake news, la desinformació, és un dels temes centrals de la campanya. A les últimes hores aquí, a l'estat espanyol, s'ha viscut de manera molt viva. Però no és un tema que només afecti a les eleccions a Espanya o als comicis que hi ha a tota Europa, sinó que és un element que crec que ha afectat en tots els moments en què hi ha hagut motius per grans fluxos d'informació. Hem tingut a Europa molt recentment els exemples de la pandèmia, hem tingut a Europa molt recentment també l'exemple de la invasió d'Ucraïna. Per tant, és un tema que preocupa a Europa i a les institucions europees. Per això vull agrair també la presència avui, d'entrada, de Caterina Barley, que és la vicepresidenta i responsable de política d'informació del Parlament Europeu. I d'entrada, bon dia, vicepresidenta Barley.
Good morning. Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me well.
Bé, aquí de moment esperant la seva intervenció. Abans m'agradaria fer uns apunts de context per veure si vostè fa un diagnòstic semblant i podem arrencar el que és la reflexió des del punt de vista de les institucions europees. El tema de la desinformació, el que, com he dit, alguns s'han anomenat la postveritat, les fake news, les mentides, és un tema que ve de lluny. I, de fet, no em remuntaré a les reflexions que va fer Hannah Arendt fa gairebé un segle, quan als anys 30 va parlar de la persuasió de la mentida. Però sí que ens podrem remuntar segurament a fa aproximadament unes 3 dècades en un moviment més o menys reactiu o reaccionari als Estats Units, quan un senyor que va ser fundador de la cadena Fox va dir una cosa que crida poderosament l'atenció i que explica molt bé quins són els models de comunicació sorgits arran de la globalització i sobretot de la multiplicació dels estímuls comunicatius, és a dir, d'una nova forma de comunicar-nos, d'una nova fórmula d'arribar a la informació. Aquest senyor es diu Robert Ellis i aquest senyor va dir una cosa així com la ciutadania no vol que li expliquem el que ha de saber, sinó que vol que li expliquem el que ha de sentir. I, per tant, apel·lava a les emocions. Un terreny que, sens dubte, és un terreny abonat en aquest contacte, diguem, que sui generis amb la realitat. I això segurament ha escampat una forma comunicativa complicada, complexa, entre la ciutadania de tot el món. També això s'ha globalitzat i ha afectat de manera molt notable a les democràcies liberals, que són les democràcies que imperen a Europa. Per acabar, fa només 4 anys vaig tenir la sort, l'oportunitat de ser als hearings en el qual els comissaris actuals de la Comissió Europea explicaven, entre altres coses, que al costat del terrorisme una de les principals amenaces i riscos per a la democràcia a Europa era precisament la desinformació. I a partir d'aquí han passat 4 anys, vicepresidenta. què ha fet, què té previst les institucions europees per combatre, per fer front a l'amenaça de la desinformació i quin és el grau on situen vostès aquesta amenaça?
Well, thank you very much. This has been very much of an input, and a lot of questions have been raised. So I will try to at least address some of them. Now, first of all, I would like to come back to the quote referring to that we should or want to tell people how they should feel, or that people want us to tell them how they should feel. I'm not so sure if this is actually what we are seeing at the moment. It is all about emotions, that's for sure. And the problem with the emotions is that you can address and stimulate negative emotions so much easier than positive ones. But what the change in the media landscape has brought is that you can pick which information you want. So actually what we are seeing is that people consume exactly the information that matches with the feelings that they have and want to have. And as unfortunately science shows, negative emotions are stronger, can be activated quicker. There is apparently with a lot easier possibility to resonate with negative feelings like fear, like mistrust, like hostile feelings towards other groups of people. So this just to react on your initial remarks. In more general terms, it is a fact that misinformation has become an enormous problem resulting from the change in media landscape. And we've seen so many examples. You mentioned the pandemic, where it was really, really obvious, and we still see the consequences of it, even though the pandemic is almost over. But also take something like Brexit. Brexit was, the whole Brexit campaign was based on disinformation, especially on disinformation about the European Union. And from the continent, it was difficult to believe that people could fall for this, because some of the lies were quite obvious. And of course, the most flagrant example is what has happened in the United States during the last months and years, with a president who actually made disinformation a strategy that is not created from the opposition, but from the government, and whose whole power was based on disinformation. And we still see the danger of this even being able to come back to power. And yes, and of course we in Europe will depend very much on how this outcome in the US will be. But what we also see is what these disinformation campaigns do to society. Because what they do is to create a complete division in society. Why? Because it's not only anymore about discussing if you think something is right or wrong, but you actually disagree on the foundation of the discussion. You actually disagree on the facts. And then there is no coming together. If you have a look at the US, if you believe that this election was stolen or not, there is no way that you actually can get together if you believe, one believes the one and the other believes the other. And that is what we see in the US, a complete division in society. And unfortunately, I'm also a British citizen. We see it not quite as extremely, but we also see it in the UK. We see a division between young and old, between more the cities and the rural areas, between poorer and richer, between the different parts of the country. but also within families sometimes even. So this is something, this is why disinformation is so dangerous, because it actually rips societies apart. And this is exactly also why it makes disinformation so difficult to combat. Because the people who want to disinform, they have actually two sorts of targets. They, on the one hand, they target very specific messages. Like, for example, the Russian war on Ukraine, saying it's not us, the Russians, who are the bad guys. It's neo-Nazis in Ukraine. It's them wanting to attack us. It's NATO, whatever. So it's very specific. But we also have another strategy, which is just to create insecurity and doubts about the political class, so to say. I don't like this notion, but about politicians, about politics in general, about democracy in general. And that they do with a sort of trial and error approach. They just fire all sorts of messages, even contradictory ones, and create this feeling of, I can't actually rely on anything. There is no truth anymore. And I can't definitely believe those who are in government. I can't believe those in power. And that this is a delegitimization of the whole democratic system. And we see this happening in, well, I would say just about every state, in some more, in some to a less extent. Now, you touched upon what we can actually do. Of course, what we need is people who can deal with this new media world. I guess I can't see you, unfortunately. I can only see Mr. Gilibert, but I guess the audience is young people. So you have grown up with this sort of media landscape. But for those who haven't, they really have to, and probably also for you to a certain extent, have to learn how to deal with it. So what we call media literacy, and then of course we have to also address media itself, journalists. What can you do? We have programs for doing both. Of course, it's not only the task of the European Union of doing so, but we do. And then we also have possibilities to legislate. For example, protecting independent journalism. For example, obliging the big social media platforms to address disinformation and others. We'll probably get into that later. But that just maybe as some opening remarks. I just want to underline that I completely agree with what you said. This is one of the biggest threats that we are facing, and I think many people are not aware of it. Adding the possibilities that artificial intelligence bring with them to take away sort of the last sources of absolute truth that we had. You know, you have a photo and you can say this is what happens, or at least you can. This is a moment in time. You can't do that anymore. Or the deep fakes that you can create also in video materials, which is even worse. And at the moment, we can still detect this. There are still technical possibilities to do so, but this won't carry on forever. So I used to be a judge, and now you come to a court and you lay down a photograph and say, look, this is how the scene of the accident or whatever crime scene looked like, and you don't know if it's true anymore. So this adds to it, to the whole very, very difficult situation that we are facing. So again, the most important thing that we need is resilience of civil societies, resilience of individuals to to address also common sense. I mean, if you sometimes hear what people believe, these conspiracy theories, they're completely crazy. So this is actually the core piece of it, to make our societies, our democracies, our media systems, our political systems resilient to these threats. And I might leave it here because I think it's more interesting to have a discussion than a long monologue. So thank you.
Sí, señora Barley, muy atentos a la explicación que ha dado. Y, entre otras cosas, yo me planteaba si lo que está pasando, ciertamente, no es que previo a la desinformación o al éxito de la desinformación siempre habrá habido gente con ánimo de mentir o de no conectar con la realidad por sus intereses, los que sean. Pero en todo caso no es consecuencia de una crisis de la representación democrática. Quizás ha faltado transparencia en las instituciones democráticas en relación al ciudadano y eso ha abierto esa puerta al éxito de la mentira.
Well, I mean, if you look at history, democratic institutions have become much more transparent than they have been decades ago. Of course, on the other hand, the will of the public to know better what is happening inside democratic systems has grown with the means to look into it, meaning media, but also meaning more civil society organizations who are willing to open up the black boxes. Let's put it that way. I'm not actually. I do see that politics and democracy should become even more transparent, but I do not believe that the two problems are interlinked in the way that you just suggested they would be, because if you have conspiracy theories, you can be as transparent as you want, and we are experiencing that at the moment. You can still create any sort of narrative that there is something behind the scenes. I mean, just take this QAnon conspiracy theory. How on earth can you be so transparent to have people, not believe that there is a club of politicians drinking children's blood to stay younger? What essentially is the theory of QAnon. I mean, there is no way that you can, that with transparency, do you want to show them your houses or your cellars, or do you want to have them take your blood and have it examined? There's no way that you can combat that. And I also think that, I'm not so familiar with the rules in Spain, I have to say. But there are very different settings when it comes to transparency in the European Union. We have a European rule that we are enforcing, that we are strengthening now. We had a very bad corruption scandal, and as a result of that, we're even stepping up more than we did before. We have countries where actually the rules are quite not that ambitious, I would say. And my home country, Germany, is part of that. But if you look at Germany, it's a stable democracy. We do have right-wing, far right-wing people rising now, as in all the other countries too, but the democracy is very stable. And then we have other countries where we have very, very big, very extensive rules on transparency, like Belgium, for example. But do we see that democracy is more stable there because people have to, if you go to politics, you have to open all your assets, you have to tell people everything you own, your house, your car, the worth of it in the beginning of the mandate and in the end. So what I want to say is, yes, we need more transparency. In the legislative process, where it is actually already very, very much transparent, you can listen to every debate, you can have a look into every document. You have legislative footprints in just about every system, and then also personally of politicians. But I don't think that is going to solve the problem of disinformation, because there is no way you can counter these conspiracy theories with transparency.
Y más allá de la transparencia, un dels elements claus probablement sigui també el control de la informació. M'explico. Després de la Segona Guerra Mundial, a Europa, tots els països van entendre que el dret de la informació era un dret prioritari i, per tant, la regulació dels mitjans de comunicació, a gairebé tota Europa, tots els mitjans són públics, poden ser concessions privades, però no deixen de ser mitjans públics, perquè havia d'haver un control de la informació en tant que s'havia de garantir el dret de la informació a la ciutadania. I aquest dret de la informació estava vinculat al rigor, al contrast i a la veracitat. Avui en dia tot això és molt més complicat perquè no només hi ha mitjans de comunicació, però sí hi ha unes empreses al darrere de tot el que és la creació de continguts i la difusió i emissió d'aquests continguts que es mouen sobretot a partir del que tots ara hem conegut, que són els algoritmes, que entre altres coses el que fan és buscar a partir normalment de les nostres passions, dels nostres desitjos, és a dir, d'allò, d'aquelles empremtes més aviat emocionals que anem deixant en les nostres cerques d'informació. Europa pot fer alguna cosa amb aquestes grans plataformes de continguts, està fent alguna cosa i es pot fer sense vulnerar el dret de la llibertat d'expressió, però sí cercant que es compleixi el dret de la informació de la ciutadania?
Yes, I think that's a very good point. The control of information is absolutely key. And it's so important that we still have reliable media sources so that we have well-functioning public media. We just today, actually, in the European Parliament, just an hour ago, as Parliament adopted our position on the European Media Freedom Act. Where we want to set rules in the European Union how to guarantee a free space for media where you do not have, for example, too much influence by big capital that nobody knows about, foreign capital that nobody knows about, media concentration, all these questions are in there. So we do actually try to deliver this safe space for public media. But I have to say, we're in a complicated world. If you have a look at this, for example, this European Media Freedom Act, what is good for systems where the public media is still working, it can be counterproductive in countries where it is already failing, like Hungary. In Hungary, public media is a source of propaganda, of the pure source of propaganda of the government. So there, for example, if we say you have to disclose foreign investment in media, then you actually more feed into their hands of the Hungarian government, because then they can say, oh, their favorite enemy is someone called George Soros, a Jewish entrepreneur, a very rich man who is trying to fight Viktor Orban and his autocratic regime. And so he will say, look, this is George Soros again investing here, and he is a bad Jew, la 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 la. So what is good in the one country can be bad in the other. It's in this world that we are in, it's really not that easy. Concerning algorithms, that is actually, I think, an underestimated weapon, but it is also difficult to address. When I was justice minister in my home country in Germany, I had Mark Zuckerberg in my office once, because I wanted to regulate or try to regulate the algorithms, because they, as you said, they determine what information you get and who gets what. So it's very, very powerful. And he said, you don't have to regulate it because we're watching it, okay? But he said something very interesting. He said there are ways of actually influencing the atmosphere in social media and to combat, and to a certain extent, these bubbles that then hype themselves up. He said there are two types. Speaking of Facebook now, Instagram would be similar. You have two types of algorithms on this platform. You have the algorithm, what you watch, what you like, what you share. And on the other hand, you have the algorithm, who are your friends? Who do you attach yourself to? And he said that they shifted the importance of algorithms from what you read, what you like, to who are your friends. Why? Because what you read, what you like, what you share is quite narrow. You have your opinion, and this is what you think, and this is what you like. Looking at your friends, it's much broader. You might have your weird old uncle in there. You have an old friend from school who's taken a completely different path in life. You have your children who may be completely against your opinion, like children often do. They completely oppose to you, but they are still your friends. So this could be a way, for example, of opening up. What I proposed when I was a justice minister, I didn't succeed with it, and I understand it's difficult. My proposal was to oblige the big platforms to integrate into their algorithms sort of something that goes against. If you walk past a booth, a newspaper booth, you just walk by and you see very different headlines. They're different because there are different newspapers still in most countries. And why not have the same on social media? Like, if they show you, out of 10, they show you 9 that you like, why not oblige them to put one in that is a little different, just so that you see there is something else? Because what is happening with these algorithms is that people stay in their bubbles and they believe everybody thinks like them. Everybody believes I'm in the majority, Everybody believes that American democratic politicians are drinking children's blood and that to stay younger. This is reality to them. So if you have every now and again one saying this QAnon theory is being invented by or whatever, just something going against it, that maybe at least you see that there is something different. It doesn't oblige you to read it. It's not censorship or anything. It's just showing there's something else than your opinion. Okay, sorry, that was a bit extensive, but it was I'm really very passionate about this algorithm subject. And what we do need is these companies, the big tech companies, need to allow independent oversight over what they're doing in the algorithms. They don't have to disclose the sort of mathematical formula. It's not about that, but the criteria, what they're actually doing. What we have now is the DSA, the Digital Services Act, that we actually adopted, which addresses especially the flops, the very large online platforms, and at least obliges them to have a system where people can address them and say, look, this is complete rubbish. This is disinformation, and they have to act on it. And but what we do not want, and that will be my last sentence on that one, we do not want to have or to be, probably where, sort of a ministry of truth. There must not and never be a public sort of institution that says this is the truth and this is a lie. I mean, I'm German. We have a very dark side in our history where people did that, and there are other parts in the world. I mean, Spain has also experienced a not so democratic period in your history, and it's always about people saying this is the truth, and everything that goes against what I'm saying is a lie and dangerous, and we would never, ever want to have that again. So we need to have rules, but not have someone from above saying, thumbs up or down.
És justament aquesta la frontera complicada, entenc, per tots els que tenen una representació política, no convertir-se en uns àrbitres de la veritat, no convertir-se això en un ministeri de la veritat, però en realitat, veient que hi ha una amenaça, sí exercir alguna mena de regulació, alguna mena de control, perquè els ciutadans no acabin precisament votant aquells que sí que volen un ministeri de la veritat, perquè es dona aquesta paradoxa. I es dona la paradoxa que fins ara s'han generat tots uns circuits en contra dels mitjans de comunicació que tenen una certa regulació i un cert control públic, quan, de fet, dels mitjans de comunicació més o menys podem saber qui són els propietaris i a quins interessos es deuen, però en canvi d'aquestes plataformes no, malgrat que sabem que tenen un model de negoci que els donen grans rendiments a partir, en moltes ocasions, de veritats, diríem, inexactes, per dir-ho suaument. En tot cas, hi ha un filòsof nord-americà que es diu Michael Sandel que diu, i ja per acabar, és una mica més filosòfic, però m'agradaria alguna reflexió al voltant. Michael Sandel situa el problema a partir de la crisi financera del 2008 de forma molt especial, però ell diu que comença amb la globalització. A la mesura que la globalització, en el relat que comporta, un relat molt vinculat només al liberalisme econòmic, situa una ciutadania guanyadora i una ciutadania perdedora. I és en la ciutadania que se sent perdedora la que té una certa o molta desconfiança en relació al que entenen que és la informació sistèmica, la del sistema, la institucional. I aquí situen tot, la ciència, els mitjans de comunicació i, com no, la política i la representació parlamentària. No sé si vostè hi està d'acord que probablement la gestió de la globalització al món genera unes incerteses, genera un terreny tan complicat que facilita tots aquests moviments des del punt de vista de la comunicació, vinculat a uns models de negoci lligats a la informació que precisament estan en aquesta globalització liberal.
Well, I agree with the first part, that globalization and the way it took place created a lot of problems, a lot of social injustice between countries. And I mean, the question is, what do you define as globalization? And I would say it's colonization, which was sort of the starting point of globalization. If you go that far, and we still see the damages, especially on the African continent, but not only. That this way of globalizing brought with it. But yes, globalization has brought a lot of injustices and, of course, also power from certain parts of society over others, certain countries over others. But then I'm, as you might have already noticed, quite critical towards the big social media companies. But then on the other hand, social media in that respect is sort of a democratization, because now every single person can actually say what he or she thinks and have the same and have an impact. And not only that, it's not only social media, it's the internet as a whole. With a very good business idea, with a very good app, for example, you can, from a very small village in wherever, in Asia, in Africa, in wherever, you can actually have a big economic success. It does happen. It's much easier than to. It's still not easy, but it's so much more likely that you can actually get out of where you are at the moment because of the internet, and social media plays a role. So there is both sides of it. I think the classical role of globalization is the one that you described, but now we do see, because media and the way of a way of expressing yourself and making your voice heard has become so much easier to everyone. We also see the opposite development. the problem being that in this whole cacophonia of messages and news and opinions, it becomes so much more difficult to find out what is the truth, if there is anything like truth. I mean, that is, again, a very philosophical question that we might not touch upon today.
No, seria complicat. Jo recordava en una publicació d'un llibre que Nietzsche deia que la veritat en realitat era una convenció, però que era necessària, una utopia però que era necessària, perquè si no, no ens entendríem entre els éssers humans, perquè cadascú miraria a la seva veritat en funció dels seus interessos, que és una mica el que està passant. En relació a això, i abans d'obrir el torn de preguntes, hi ha una paradoxa a Espanya, però que crec que es pot extrapolar a tot el món. L'element pioner en xarxa a tot el món en relació a la informació es va donar, curiosament, a l'estat espanyol arran d'uns atemptats que hi va haver a Madrid i amb una cosa tan rudimentària com l'SMS. La gent es va començar a passar SMS en relació a la versió que estava donant el govern d'aquells atemptats. I aquell govern i el partit que hi havia en aquell govern va patir a les urnes perquè la ciutadania va decidir condemnar la mentida. Uns anys després, en canvi, sembla que la mentida es premia electoralment en molts casos. Què ha passat, vicepresidenta?
Well, I'm not sure if I really got the question right. I mean,
Sí, molt simplement.
They're not that new anymore.
Molt simplement, hem passat d'una societat que condemnava la mentida i que utilitzava el primer rudiment de la comunicació en xarxa per condemnar aquesta mentida i fer caure un govern a uns electors que a tota Europa i a tot el món estan premiant la mentida. El cas dels Estats Units, el cas del Brasil, el cas del Brexit, etc. Què ha canviat? Què ha passat en la ciutadania perquè passi de condemnar la mentida de forma rotunda i de comunicar-la a través d'aquest rudiment en xarxa a premiar-la a partir de les informacions que rep a la xarxa?
I don't think that has changed. I think it's just two different situations. I mean, after Atocha or the other terrible events, it was so clear how everyone felt. So it's a common, especially in a nation, it brings you together. But then you have other questions where it's not so clear, and I think there it has always been the case that if you were good at putting a lie somewhere, even before the social media age, you could actually be rewarded for that. I mean, just take all these terrible incidents of anti-Semitism or racism across the world, across history. It has, I mean, saying that Jews steal Christian children has been alive for centuries, even before social media. And I mean, the country I know best is Germany. That was also before social media. It's like 20 years ago or something. We had a state election, and then a conservative politician was about to lose, and they just know that migration is always a topic that you can get the emotion of people. And we didn't have a problem with it. It was just that the government was thinking of giving people who had been in Germany for a long time a German passport as a second passport, not even as a first, as a second, as an additional one. And they just chose this as a campaign subject, which actually, I mean, what does it damage in your life if a few thousand people get a German passport? I mean, but you had thousands of people, and they really went to these election campaign stands, and they said, literally, the question was, where can I sign up against foreigners? That was what they said, you know. So it's so easy if you go for scapegoats to divide. I mean, you will have sensible people who say, well, is that really our problem? I mean, come on, people who have been living here for 20 years, who've never committed any crime, who pay their taxes to give them a passport, is that really a problem? And then you have those who go, yeah, but being German is something so special. And so it's emotions, you said it. Tackle an emotional question, and you will have, with social media or without, you will have people running against. But with the new possibilities, the new technical possibilities, you have a different way of telling the lie. I think that is the difference. Now you have the possibility of creating photos that don't reflect anything that ever happened. You have the possibility of giving interviews with people who, I mean, nobody would have listened to before, but now you can call them an expert, and everyone refers to this person now for no reason. So the possibilities of spreading a lie and enforcing it have increased. It's not the human nature. Human nature, unfortunately, if you touch on whatever a person is sensitive for, and anything about children, I mean, it's maybe not a coincidence that both examples that I mentioned, QAnon and the Jewish being denounced, are about children. It's so easy to catch the emotions there. So I don't. That's how I see the developments that we are facing. It's nothing new. It's just a new technique which makes it more dangerous.
Sí, no, absolutament d'acord. He apel·lat al principi de tot a Hannah Arendt, que precisament parlava de la capacitat persuasiva de la mentida, en la mesura que es vincula més en les emocions en moltes ocasions que la realitat, perquè la realitat està vinculada només, en principi, a la realitat. Si li sembla, obrim el torn de preguntes, tant aquí a la sala com a través dels que ens estan seguint online. No sé si hi ha alguna pregunta a la sala per la... Bé, ara us passaran el...
Bueno, la meva pregunta era de que, com hem dit, les fake news no és un problema únicament en local, sinó és un problema a nivell global, i com molts problemes a nivells globals s'han solucionat per regulacions d'institucions internacionals. I la meva pregunta seria en aquest sentit de que si creieu que seria una possible solució generar una institució o internacional per intentar regular, no crear a més notícies, però regular les notícies o el nivell de veracitat que tenen dels diferents països, com els Estats Units o Rússia o inclús la Unió Europea.
Sí, vicepresidenta.
Shall I answer straight away, or do we want to collect questions?
No, si li sembla fem una ronda i així serà més dinàmic.
Gràcies. Miri, jo volia preguntar sobre... Considera que la paradoxa dels nostres sistemes liberals i concretament de la xarxa de mitjans de comunicació europea ja de per si el permetre l'anomenada llibertat d'expressió molt més que altres països i, per exemple, regular i liberalitzar les concessions privades a mitjans de comunicació diferentment, com per exemple a Rússia, Russia Today. Per exemple, el cas de quan Russia Today va annexar-se a Crimea i va organitzar campanyes deliberades de desinformació contra els estats europeus i els Estats Units, es defensava que no es tanqués Russia Today precisament per garantir la llibertat d'expressió, però ara, amb la invasió a Ucraïna, s'ha pres una altra decisió. Veient que potser la decisió fàcil per part dels nostres sistemes és, evidentment, prohibir campanyes de desinformació deliberades, considera que ens enfrontem possiblement a una tendència pseudoautoritària i molt fàcil de prohibir mitjans de comunicació I de nou, quina és l'amenaça de prohibir mitjans de comunicacions com a solució fàcil per atacar la desinformació i quines altres solucions es podrien posar sobre la taula? Moltes gràcies.
Bones. Jo volia posar una mica el focus sobre l'usuari final, sobre l'audiència, i sobre el paper de les institucions en relació amb aquesta plaga. Si diem que les notícies falses i la desinformació és una amenaça tan gran com el terrorisme, per exemple, no ens estem quedant curts en l'esforç que fan les institucions per fer entendre al ciutadà coses tan essencials i senzilles com que existeixen les càmeres d'eco, les ecocàmers, que les xarxes socials només et mostren idees similars a les que tu tens amb aquesta mena de càmera d'eco que funciona d'aquesta manera. O no ens estem quedant sense dir-li al ciutadà que potser més de la meitat de les coses que consumeix en un dia amb unes xarxes socials són mentides o són simplement parcialment veritat. Jo crec que això justificaria campanyes de comunicació, de publicitat, tinc una certa edat i us remetria, sou tots molt joves, als anys 90, quan aquí a Espanya, per exemple, va haver campanyes de publicitat molt efectives, molt impactants sobre el tabac amb el Cruyff o sobre la cocaïna amb un cuc que entrava pel nas d'una persona. Hem d'anar a buscar potser també aquesta via de complicitat amb la publicitat i fer que la gent entengui, almenys, que ha d'adoptar, que la gent sigui conscient que hi ha aquest problema, perquè crec que la majoria de la gent no és ni tan sols conscient. I a més, crec que també anem tard amb això, perquè ara ja no és només això que li hem d'explicar a la gent, sinó que li hem d'explicar que amb la intel·ligència artificial veurà imatges que no són reals, veurà fotografies que no són reals, escoltarà veus que no són reals. Anem tard. Jo crec que necessitem, pregunto, no necessitaríem unes campanyes institucionals bombardejant a la població sobre això?
Hola, gràcies. La meva pregunta s'ha esmentat una mica ja, però va sobre una mica la relació entre hate speech i free speech, entre el discurs d'odi i el discurs i el free speech. La meva pregunta és qui i sobretot qui definiria i com s'hauria de definir la línia vermella entre aquests dos conceptes per evitar que continuïn els discursos d'odi contra el col·lectiu LGTB, contra jueus, que també m'ha esmentat, etc. I sí, quin hauria de ser el paper de les institucions europees en definir aquesta línia?
Bé, en les campanyes de desinformació els bots han jugat un paper fonamental, però ara també estem veient el gran alcance que té la intel·ligència artificial. Ara, personalment, no he vist com s'estenia per xarxes socials, com els usuaris cada cop es familiaritzen més amb aquesta eina, però també actors que poden ser nocius. En aquest sentit, quina és la postura del Parlament en la seva regulació en xarxes socials i bé, una mica en el context en general. Gràcies.
I would speak in English and then I will translate it myself in Spanish or in Catalan. Is it fine? O he de parlar català millor? Estan traduint ja?
Sí. Pots fer-ho directament en anglès.
Val, però si parlo anglès no cal que tradueixen. Okay, thank you very much for your great examples, and most of them were connected to the Jewish population. And it's quite clear because Germany, that was the narrative Germany faced to the recent years. But I would say that the disinformation existed always, and even the church, the religion, used it. Because if you are disinformed, somebody can profit. And it's always the question of benefits, and it will never disappear. So my question is, since it's reality and it will not vanish, neither tomorrow nor the other day, how can the population be prepared to distinguish, thanks to discourse analysis, whether there's something subjective or something objective, and how can the future journalist be obliged to follow the ethic code and the moral code that they sometimes violate just because of they're paid better and they're biased. So that's my question. La pregunta és... no cal.
Crec que hi ha una última pregunta, vicepresidenta.
Hi, good morning. I just wanted to ask more of a technical question. It's like Instagram users or Facebook users, for example, they already have many warnings of the social media when you're looking some content. And for sure, using social media inside the European Union is not the same as using it in another continent. The content you are able to see, it's different. And there are some warnings already, I suppose, because of the legislation that has been done in recent years. And I wanted to ask what would be the next step for the European Union dealing with these big techs, like all Meta, social media, for example, in order to address more directly this kind of content. Because usually, for example, you get to see if there is violent content online, there is a warning for it. Or what they did with COVID, every time you posted something or saying the word vaccine or COVID-19, it already appear, right? Like behind the post or story or whatever, it's warning for the user that maybe this information should be revised. So, well, what would be the next step for legislating something like that? Thank you.
Bé, aquesta era l'última qüestió. No sé si vol que repassem, vostè s'ho ha apuntat tot fil per randa i ho contesta tot de cop.
I think I took good notes, and I thank you. These were, without exception, absolutely excellent questions, and they are sometimes interlinked. So I think that is why I will try to maybe answer them all together, if you don't mind, because already the second question was sort of an answer to the first. I mean, first of all, I want to say we try not to use the notion fake news. I sometimes do, sorry, but we actually try to speak about disinformation because and it's not misinformation, it's disinformation, because as long as someone says something which you believe is not true, it is very difficult to actually address it legally, sometimes even morally. But disinformation, therefore we use because there is an intention behind it. There is the intention not only to lie, but also to have a certain effect with it. And that is the part that we feel we are legitimized to address legally. Because again, we are proud of the freedom of speech. And we do not want to go through every social media program, whatever, or every newspaper or every TV channel and say, look, this was not correct and that was not correct. We have to really focus on those messages that are being sent to disinform. Okay? And what can we do? Actually, yes, it was mentioned by the two first speakers. We can ban media, and we did in the European Union with two Russian TV channels. It's really the absolute ultima ratio. It's really the bazooka, so to say, because it is, of course, a big, it does interfere into media freedom. But these, especially the Russian channels, it is proven that not only they spread lies, but they do this to reach certain goals, be it in Ukraine, be it to destabilize Western democracies. So we do have a weapon and we use it, but really only as a last solution. And what else can we do? To the second speaker, what can media do also? Well, first of all, and I reflected in a lot of questions, the responsible people in media, first of all, have to deal with it. They have to be aware not to fall in the trap themselves, and they have to know how to react if you run into disinformation. So I think it's a discussion everywhere. Do you, if you have a panel discussion, for example, in a talk show, do you invite someone who has this completely contrary opinion where you would feel this is close to disinformation? Look at the Russian war in Ukraine with someone saying, well, yes, but Ukraine actually was provoking or whatever. Do you invite this kind of people? Now, that has to be decided at the level, but the point is, never ever should it happen what I once actually saw myself, a talk show where you had a one-on-one discussion, and there was one person saying LGBTI is a disease. I mean, being homosexual is a disease, and you had one LGBTI activist arguing against it. Because then, of course, you make it look like it's just two opinions that you can have, and you can think this one is better or that one is better. And this, of course, is not something that media, responsible media, should never do. If you think it is necessary to dismantle a conspiracy theorist or whoever, then at least make it clear that this is being, either by putting one and like four others, which reflects also probably the majorities, or maybe five, or I don't know, but making absolutely clear that this is a highly disputed opinion and not one that you can just take as easily as the other one. If you invite such people at all, but this sometimes happens that you have like, okay, you can, I don't know if any other example comes to my mind now, but I think this example of homosexuality is an absolutely striking one, or maybe if you have people of color have per se a lower intelligence rate than white people, and you just put one here and one there and let them discuss. No, you see, this is of course something that media has to stay neutral. But when it comes to this when it comes to disinformation, not just maybe someone of a different opinion, or maybe even someone who tells lies, but disinformation has to take a stance. And what the third speaker said, of course, is absolutely crucial, is media literacy. We have to, as she said, we really have to get our population to sense this and to know how to deal with it. Now where can you start? Of course, you always start in schools. We have to do that. And I can say for my country, I think it's not enough that we're doing there yet. We try it, for example, we have European Parliament ambassador schools. So when it comes to lies on the European Union, we really try to give a proper image of what we're doing. We're not perfect, but sort of, showing it as it is, as we perceive it is. Because this, of course, if I may say that, you quoted Hannah Arendt. I mean, she's Jewish, so sorry if I refer to that so often, but of course she had experienced what disinformation can do at the worst. But I actually I used to be a judge, as I said, and once we did an experiment. Someone showed us like a puppet that was turning in one direction and put it on the wall, and then please write down what you have seen. And probably 3/4 of the people wrote down, I see a puppet that is turning to the left, and about and the rest said, I see a puppet that is turning to the right. And we were laughing at them and saying, I mean, come on, you can't even distinguish left from right. But the solution was that indeed, with this image, with this very special image, depending on which part of the brain, the left or the right, is your dominant one, you actually saw it differently. So this was done to make us judges aware that if you have someone in court who says, I'm 100% sure I saw this and that, it is not the reality. It is the perception of this and the memory of this single person. So there just is no such thing as reality where we can all agree upon it. It's as easy and as complicated on that. So again, we cannot, and that leads me to the fourth point. Who defines what is hate speech and what is free speech? Of course, we have criminal laws. So that is very clear as soon as it becomes a threat to the security of a person, as soon as it crosses the lines of any legal whatever you have, code penal in your, or whatever law in your country, it is easy. But then you have this gray zone, and we tried to find rules for this, to have people say this is dangerous and to report it, and then to have the platform being obliged to take it down if it was potentially damaging to, for example, the security or the health of a person. But it stays, this is really the most, it's not black and white, and how to deal with the gray is really the most difficult question, I would say. When it comes to AI, we actually just also, I think a couple of weeks ago, adopted the Parliament's position on our AI Act. And I have to say that the European Union actually is the level of legislation where we have been very, very successful on limiting the power of the big tech giants. We did this already with the GDPR when it came to the question on collecting data. So in Europe, we have very strict rules on how these companies, but not only these companies, are allowed to store and to use your data. Because, of course, your data is becoming in our modern world more and more sort of you. I mean, you can be completely manipulated if someone has a lot of data about you. So we have very strict rules on this with the General Data Protection Regulation. And what we have seen is actually, it was difficult. It took us 7 years to get there. And it was highly disputed because it was sort of complicated and you know, for businesses, they had to fill in forms and la la la. But it turned out that it was a very, very effective weapon, and that it was copied by legislation all over the world. Over 70 countries actually copied the GDPR, and even in California they did. So you are the master of your data. You decide, do I allow, if I use this, and I go on a website and they have to ask me, may I collect your data for that and that purpose? And I am allowed to say no. Now we have to do it, huh? I mean, how many people just go allow all? I can swear it's just one click more to say no. Because if you go on settings, then you can say reject all. It's just one click more. It's not that difficult. But people just don't do it. But it's not, we can't do any more than that. And I can actually just ask you, go on settings and say reject all. if they want to sell you something, they're still going to have the complete. You're not going to be limited to anything. They still want you to buy there. So but don't give away your data. And the AI Act now, we don't have very much time left. I'm sorry. Just very roughly, will be about how do we allow AI and how, and because we can't keep up with the developments, the technical developments, we decided to look at it from the result side, from the effect side. So we have 4 categories. We have some that we completely ban, which is, for example, social scoring, as in China, which is, for example, emotional recognition that people can, I look at this screen now and I see you're a depressive person, or you have cancer or something like that, or you are, in love. This kind of thing, we will, that is forbidden. We have some that we will regulate, which is, for example, facial recognition. We will have some that we allow, but you have to signal that it is artificial intelligence. For example, texts created by ChatGPT or deep fakes. It's not dangerous anymore when you have a photo and it says, or a video and it says this is created by AI. Then it's not dangerous anymore. So you can do it, but you have to say it's AI. And the 4th is where we just let it go. It's just fine, like your navigation system or whatever. So this is how we want to address AI. 2 questions left. Subjective or objective. Disinformation always existed. Yes, it did. But there is everything that we say or do is subjective. We do never give anything objective. So we really have to let go of this concept that there is anything that is absolute. It's not. I totally agree with the ethics code that the last but one speaker actually referred to. We need this within the media world. Someone actually in Germany came up with the idea of having journalists, but also people who create films, having them certified to be sort of like who actually commit to an ethics code, for example, and therefore become certified, who say, for example, I will never use AI without saying that I do, or I will, whatever ethics code you do, and then to have like certified people where you have, as a user, you can see this is someone I might be able to trust more than others. So this could be an idea. Yes, and then on the how do we deal with platforms like Insta and Facebook, where we already have warnings. The interesting thing also is these warnings are very different all across the world, or the bans. I mean, in the US, as soon as you see like too much of a female breast or too much naked skin, your photo gets banned from social media, even if it's a piece of art, which is really bizarre. They have this very peculiar notion of being, nakedness is something very dangerous. Whereas, sorry to say it again, in my country, if you deny that the Holocaust took place, it's a criminal offense. It's a crime. So you get banned immediately for that. Whereas in another country, it might be very religious questions. If you in Arab countries, as soon as you say anything against Allah, you will be banned immediately. So this is, and there you see how that it is not objective. It is not, and therefore, again, we have to say freedom of speech is something very important. We have to give rules. We have to make these rules being applied, and we have to deal with the with the clear offences and the extremes. And maybe that as a very last point, we have to be aware that we have to adapt constantly. This world is changing constantly, and we really have to be aware that we have to go, especially in legislation, every step, and keep a close eye on it. And I'm very happy to see, not to see, but to know that there is a big crowd of young people who are interested in this subject and who see the needs, because this is what we need. We need your generation to be aware of it, and your generation to spread the news that you actually asked us to do. You have to do it too, because you are much more credible in your peer group than I am. I'm a politician, I'm far away, but if you say that within your, I don't know, friends and sports club and universities, this is much more credible. So we all have to work together to make this work.
Vicepresidenta, d'entrada agrair el nivell de les preguntes perquè crec que estaven a molta alçada. S'ha parlat d'intel·ligència artificial, del delicte d'odi, de la llibertat d'expressió, del control i la regulació. Només volia fer-li una última pregunta que crec que tots els europeus ens podem estar fent arran de la desinformació. La desinformació pot acabar sent una eina d'ingerència política des de l'exterior. S'ha vist, per exemple, amb el tema de la invasió d'Ucraïna. Com a arma de guerra, la Unió Europea està preparant alguna regulació, algun element per combatre la desinformació feta servir en aquest sentit, en el de la guerra?
Yes, it is already a threat. It has already been a threat. We know that, for example, Brexit or also the French elections, also the German elections, there were attempts, especially of Russia, to interfere. And yes, we are acting on very different levels. We are at the moment debating a piece of legislation on foreign interference or tackling foreign interference, as well as also political advertisement to make it more clear. This is people who try to influence you politically. We also, as a parliament, try to develop tools. We have found out that it does not work to take a piece of disinformation and sort of say this is being spread, but it is not true. This doesn't work. What works better is to create counter content. So to react on it by spreading the truth, which counters this disinformation, we are preparing these things in advance because we try to sense where these attacks are going to come, and there are some which are obvious that go to a warning of election fraud. This is very common, or of specific actors that are close to the Russian or whoever foreign interference, that they are being denied access to whatever, that they are disadvantaged in the discussion. So we're trying to prepare this in advance, and if we did not foresee it, then to act very quickly. And there are other tools like creating networks where we so that we can sense earlier what is going to happen. But unfortunately, it is always a reactive process. I mean, so what we do in the very first place is try to place the positive images and to give them a high importance, to actually show the good parts or the good sides of democracy, the good sides of the European Union, what we do, and to make that also a weapon against this disinformation.
Vicepresidenta, moltes gràcies per tot el que ens ha explicat. Veig que no sé si la ciutadania confiarà o no en les institucions europees, però vostè ha donat mostres, com a mínim, de poder-ho respondre tot i de tenir un criteri clar que em sembla que és important, que la veritat absoluta no existeix. La veritat absoluta a Europa la vam viure en forma de veritat revelada i durant molts anys, segles, vam tenir aquesta veritat revelada i sincerament no crec que els ciutadans visquessin millor en les seves llibertats, en els seus drets, etc. Per tant, està molt bé trobar una autoritat política que té molt clar que la veritat no existeix, però que sí que ha de no haver veritats més convenients perquè tots puguem viure, si més no, en un espai digne de convivència. I és bo, per tant, saber-ho, que hi ha una vicepresidenta, que la tenim informada, que la tenim molt preparada en aquesta qüestió, o ha respost absolutament tot. Ho dic perquè això els polítics no ho solen fer, respondre sobre tot. Per tant, és important que vostè ho sàpiga fer. I crec que ha fet un debat que valorarem tots i totes, que ha estat, jo crec que important, que ha estat molt interessant i, per tant, felicitats i moltes gràcies per la seva participació.
Thank you. Thank you for this very fruitful discussion and good luck for the future.
Bé, doncs un cop acabat el debat fem un descans i després sí tindrem més un debat, una discussió en relació a tot el que ha quedat sobre la taula en aquesta conversa. Gràcies. No, ho domina. ara amb un debat en relació a tots els temes que han sortit en la conversa amb la vicepresidenta, que com hem vist és d'una extrema complexitat, perquè crec que ha quedat bastant clar que el tema de la desinformació i la democràcia és un tema multifactorial. És a dir, que hi ha molts factors que poden impulsar aquesta desinformació i que, com dèiem, pot acabar representant un risc per la democràcia tal com l'hem entès, almenys fins ara. Crec que ha quedat molt clar el diagnòstic, és a dir, tots i totes podríem acabar compartint quin és el diagnòstic i acceptar que, efectivament, la desinformació pot representar un risc per tota la ciutadania i per aquesta ciutadania a la qui se la interpel·la perquè prengui decisions en l'esfera pública. I, per tant, per això la informació és tan important, per això el dret de la informació és tan important, perquè nosaltres, els ciutadans, acabem prenent les decisions que acabaran afectant en aquesta esfera pública. Per tant, el diagnòstic, més o menys, no sé si en parlarem molt del diagnòstic, jo crec que caldria començar a parlar de les teràpies i gràcies a les vostres intervencions aquí se n'han posat algunes sobre la taula, com per exemple l'alfabetització de la ciutadania, cosa que no és fàcil, ara ho parlarem, però l'alfabetització de la ciutadania pel que fa al consum de continguts no és gens fàcil, entre altres coses perquè els continguts són molt diversos i perquè no només la informació juga en aquesta lliga de la desinformació, també l'entreteniment o la ficció pot jugar en aquesta lliga. I per tant, com controlem quines teràpies apliquem a banda de l'alfabetització que s'ha apuntat o del control i la regulació de les institucions. Per això ara comença una taula rodona en la que intentarem, com diu aquell, posar llum a la foscor, en relació a com solucionem els problemes que tenim amb la desinformació un cop ja hem diagnosticat que efectivament tenim una malaltia i ara hauríem de trobar les teràpies. Per parlar d'això tenim la Martina Vilchikiewicz, que és de comunicació estratègica prospectiva, comunicació estratègica, grups de treball i anàlisi de la informació del Servei Europeu d'Acció Exterior, la Caterina Klingová, perdó per la pronúncia, investigadora sènior del Centre for Democracy and Resilience Policy Institute, i la Carme Colomina, que és investigadora sènior del CIDOB. Amb totes elles, doncs, començarem a plantejar aquestes teràpies, aquestes possibles solucions, aquest diagnòstic. No sé si han pogut escoltar la intervenció de la vicepresidenta del Parlament Europeu en relació a la qüestió, però en tot cas hi han sortit diversos temes. A mi m'agradaria començar precisament, ja que reprenem el fil a partir de la conversa amb la vicepresidenta, de quin creuen, des del seu punt de vista, que han de ser el paper de les institucions, el paper de la política, sobretot tenint en compte que en moltes ocasions la política participa també d'aquest festival, d'aquest circ de la desinformació. Per tant, si us sembla, comencem amb la senyora Vilchikiewicz. No sé si té alguna cosa a dir, alguna reflexió en relació a quin ha de ser el paper de les institucions, el paper de la política en el combat a l'amenaça de la desinformació.
Good morning from Brussels. Thank you very much for having me. I hope you can hear me well. Well, I think the most important thing to be said for starters is that there is no one single institution or any other entity that can deal with the problem of disinformation and information manipulation. And we're all in this together. That said, obviously the political institutions, if I got your question right, have the unique role of being the regulators, being the lawmakers. So it's up to them to actually make the law work in order to combat disinformation. And so, you know, the very basic answer to your question would be that it is up to those institutions to legislate, to make sure that regulation also works when it is adopted already. And in that area, a lot has happened in the last few years. I will come back to that, but I also want to say that the institutions on the European Union level also have been instrumental in building the whole comprehensive, I would say, system of response to disinformation and information manipulation. So the way we did it, and because my team is part of this effort, has been for the last years. The way we did it, and I'm not going to go into details right now, but just to outline the basic thinking behind the response on our level. We did it by constructing 4 pillars. The first pillar is the situational awareness, which means, well, you need to understand what is happening in the information environment in order to act. The second pillar is capacity building, which means, again, not going into too many details, but it means really providing society with tools that will empower them to fight themselves against disinformation. The third pillar is international cooperation, because on the European Union level, we realized, especially during the COVID pandemic, that really we can't go it alone, even being an institution of 27 member states and different stakeholders. It's not enough to fight the challenge just among us. There is a strong cooperation between the member states and between the institutions. However, it goes now across the Atlantic, and it goes into many directions globally towards like-minded partners such as the US, Japan, G7, NATO, and others. And then the fourth pillar, and Vice President, I heard, touched on it a little bit, is something that we continue to develop these days, and this is what we call disruption. So these are, for example, sanctions for disinformation. But I can go into details perhaps later on in the discussion. But I wanted to point out that, well, it really is necessary to have an institution, a political one, to come up with a system as comprehensive as the one I just described. And it is up to the political institutions to make sure that the system works. So that would be rather short still answer to your question.
Sí, arran del que ara escoltàvem, no sé si la senyora Kling-Obrà tindrà resposta a fins a quin paper en el moment que les institucions actuen no hi ha el perill, una, de convertir-se en el Ministeri de la Veritat, al que feia referència la vicepresidenta europea, i de l'altra, en generar resistències en la ciutadania en tant que hi pugui veure un interès de les institucions europees no fàcilment explicable o que li sembla que no és fàcilment explicable.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the organizers for the opportunity to speak. Greetings from Bratislava. Greetings to Barcelona. Greetings to Brussels, Carme, Martina. It's a pleasure to see you again this virtually. I'm looking forward to the debate, and greetings to the participants who are who are interested in the topics. I didn't slightly understand the last questions, but let me just address the first questions and follow up on Martina. I think that building societal resilience is a whole of government, whole of society process. Nobody can do it alone. That means that public institutions, but also citizens themselves, but also private companies as Meta and Google have a responsibility. And we need to cooperate together. We need to be behind one table in order to create that societal resilience. That to say, building societal resilience takes time. It's a long-term process, and the policies that need to be adopted, some can be short-term, but some can be really long-term, especially if you were talking about the need to reconstruct educational system. It takes time, it takes a lot of money. So the first thing that we need when it comes to politics or political institution is that we need to have strong political leaders who eventually support those reforms, building societal resilience, and make sure that the big statements are followed up with budget lines. You can have a lot of people from the European Union, but also national representatives give nice speeches, but at the same time not follow up with the necessary money to make those reforms. It is important to realize, and as you said, politics or politicians themselves they themselves spread the disinformation and oftentimes conspiracy theories. We've started to monitor disinformation in Central Europe back in 2014, 2015, and back then when we really saw that most of the disinformation was really coming from Russia, but in the past 2-3 years, majority of the disinformation in our societies is being spread by the domestic political actors. So we need to, as a society, as citizens, we need to put pressure on these political leaders and build the political culture to make sure that our, representatives, because they are our representatives, are spreading truth and do not spread disinformation or polarizing narratives. So as we as citizens have an important role, we should be calling up to our political leadership and calling up on them when they're spreading disinformation and ask them to wage, let's say, truthful and not polarizing debates in our societies. It can be problematic, but we need to try. As Martina said, building situational awareness is especially important because it gives you an understanding on where you're at, what are your vulnerabilities, and this is also very important for public representatives, political representatives, because they themselves, if they do not have necessary situational awareness, if they do not understand the problematics, and if they do not understand that they themselves can be the targets of foreign malign influence, they could be approached by various Chinese, or Russian, or other entities and serves as a venue of foreign malign influence, then they cannot come up with necessary policies. Sometimes it would be good if the politicians would put their let's say, egos aside and let the experts talk. But important element in this is that you as a moderator in the previous panel, you were quoting Hannah Arendt. You said that lies are connected with emotions, of reality is connected with reality. But if we have good strategic communication of public institutions, which have been often lacking and which public institutions are just focusing about or just in the past 2 years building, then the citizens, our societies will be much more better informed. And that already increases significantly the situational awareness of the citizens and society as such, but it provides important information from the sources, from the core sources, as public institutions are, and I mean, they should be playing that role for the institutions. So, long story cut short, we need to work together, and we need to make sure that our own political representatives do not spread disinformation. I'll end here, and I'm looking forward to the debate.
Bé, molt interessant la reflexió que feia, però en tot cas jo preguntava fins a quin punt, en la mesura que les institucions entren en el control de la informació, no hi pot haver el risc que apuntava la vicepresidenta del Parlament Europeu de la creació de la figura del Ministeri de la Veritat. És a dir, com podem atorgar credibilitat a les institucions perquè facin aquesta regulació, aquest control de la informació? En la mesura que tenen l'obligació per garantir el dret de la informació dels ciutadans.
I think that nobody wants to create the Ministry of Truth, both at national and international level. This was also raised by Ms. Vice President. There are several ways how this could be established, and this goes to the strategic communication or institutional communication of public institutions. This is something that we've been seeing has been lacking. Usually, the communication of the ministries of public institutions reflected the political leadership of the particular minister or state secretary at the place. But there are some countries, like Estonia or Baltic countries, where it is the institutional communication of public institutions that is independent of any kind of political influence. You have a spokesperson of institutions that do not change with the change of the government, and they have been at their post for oftentimes decades, and they are the voices of reasons and the people that represent the trust for citizens, because they've been there for they've been talking to them for years. So good strategic communication is apolitical. Good strategic communication relies on experts of institutions. And if you have good stratcom of public institutions that already provides the multiplicity of voices, because that means that good strategic communication will be not unified. It could be coordinated by having set keys of principal strategic narratives based on democratic principles of particular countries. But it will mean that you will have strong Ministry of Education. You will have a strong communication from Minister of Foreign Affairs, who would be communicating their own specific important reforms, policies, but they will be based on unified, let's say, democratic principles and human rights. And in that sense, there will be no, one Ministry of Truth. These are the examples that exist, and we see from the Baltic states, we see from communication of, for example, New Zealand during the pandemic, that good strategic communication is not about providing one truth, but providing the right information at the right time, so that people are informed and can take informed decisions in times of pandemic, informed decisions in time of electoral campaign or pre-election. They can take informed decisions during the time of war or during the times of crises.
Interessant el concepte de la independència. Crec que és un dels elements essencials que acaba de sortir en aquest debat, no? La independència d'uns sectors que, sense tenir vinculacions polítiques o adscripcions polítiques o partidistes, puguin fer el control d'aquesta informació. I aquí és on m'agrada fer el lligam amb Carme Colomina, que té el seu passat periodístic, i que, per tant, sap què vol dir això d'aquesta utopia de la independència periodística. Perquè també en el periodisme la independència hauria de ser un dels eixos vertebradors per fer la seva feina. I aquí passem de l'actor polític a l'actor periodístic. Fins a quin punt, a la majoria de països europeus, els sectors periodístics que haurien de ser independents de la política en moltes ocasions no han fracassat en aquest intent, per diversos motius, també això és multifactorial, i han deixat, per entendre'ns, a la ciutadania orfa d'aquesta independència necessària en tant que òrgan garant del dret de la informació perquè pugui detectar les mentides polítiques. O dit d'altra manera, ara es deia, els polítics també juguen a la desinformació. A Espanya n'estem tenint uns exemples que crec que són bastant interessants. Però fins a quin punt el periodisme, que es podria convertir en el controlador o fiscalitzador d'aquests polítics, no hauria de reflexionar sobre el seu paper?
Bon dia a tothom, finalment, després de tanta estona asseguda aquí davant vostra, i bon dia també a la Caterina i a la Martina. Més que una pregunta, és una tesi doctoral.
Perquè estic segur que sabràs sintetitzar.
Breument. Jo crec que hi ha moltes coses, molts fenòmens, molts factors que han canviat el paper dels mitjans de comunicació en els últims anys. Clarament, amb internet hi ha aquest procés que en un principi es diu desintermediació, perquè els mateixos mitjans de comunicació, però també la política, els experts, els sindicats perden aquest monopoli que tenien en la interpretació de la realitat, que durant molt de temps havien exercit. Fins i tot, i estic totalment d'acord amb el que deia la vicepresidenta, no hem de perdre de vista en cap moment ni caure en la criminalització de les xarxes socials per se, perquè tenen aquesta funció de democratització de la llibertat d'expressió i en molts països, més enllà del continent europeu, fan aquesta feina, aquesta tasca, aquesta oportunitat també de donar veu encara als qui no tenen accés al monopoli. Per tant, aquest és el primer canvi, però d'aquell procés de desintermediació hem passat a un procés de mediació clarament, algorítmica, de la nostra realitat i de l'esfera pública, de la qual som menys conscients. Aquest és el primer problema. El segon problema és clarament que estem en un sistema molt fragmentat, en un sistema mediàtic molt fragmentat a la Unió Europea. Quan parlem de la responsabilitat dels mitjans de comunicació, estaríem parlant de realitats molt diferents en cada estat membre. Això vol dir que la capacitat d'independència dels mitjans, que la credibilitat i la fortalesa dels mitjans públics, a on resideix la confiança dels ciutadans en les fonts fiables, és diferent entre estats membres i això fa molt difícil crear uns estàndards, una normativa, un marc que serveixi per tots. I la llei de la Media Freedom Act, que també ha sortit en la intervenció anterior, és l'exemple més clar. El que pot servir per uns mitjans pot estar enfortint precisament la situació dels mitjans a Hongria, en comptes de reforçar-los. Aquest és el segon problema. I tercer, i és molt difícil, crec que tot això reforça els diferents pilars amb què s'ha aproximat la desinformació a nivell de la Unió Europea. La Martina parlava primer de 4 pilars, i jo també posaré els meus una mica que van en aquesta línia de com reforcem el debat públic o com a mínim com intentem rebaixar la toxicitat del relat públic, perquè és que no és només la desinformació, és el nivell de toxicitat. Crec que cada vegada més ens hem adonat que aquest món de la conversa pública està fet de línies difuses, de línies difuses entre opinió i informació, de línies difuses entre opinió o informació i espectacle, també de línies difuses entre actors desinformatius o desinformadors estatals i no estatals, i fins i tot de línies difuses sobre quin és el contingut condemnable o no condemnable. També s'ha preguntat abans quins són els límits del discurs d'odi. Aquest és un altre. En anglès li diuen aquest borderline content, diuen lawful but awful, doncs és aquesta realitat. Hi ha una sèrie de contingut sobre el que tu no pots actuar perquè és legal, però que té unes implicacions de toxicitat en el discurs públic molt important. I això fa que necessitis, i s'ha apuntat molt bé fins ara amb la Caterina i la Martina, aquestes diferents aproximacions, la geoestratègica i securitària, la protecció del consumidor amb l'enfortament de la resiliència i de la transparència, la Digital Service Act clarament va en aquesta línia, i després la protecció del dret a la informació, que va molt més enllà de la desinformació, sinó de com protegeixes la pluralitat mediàtica, com protegeixes l'accés a informació veraç, i això no implica només la conversa pública, implica una cosa tan real en aquests moments com la intel·ligència artificial, com garanteixes que la intel·ligència artificial es faci a partir de l'accés de dades fiables, d'informació fiable. Per tant, crec que el que faig és incidir més en la complexitat del problema.
El diagnòstic cada cop el tenim més xungo i la teràpia cada cop més complicada. No sé, però surten aquí diversos temes que m'agradaria que comentéssim de la forma més espontània possible. Fa uns mesos, arran de tot el que va ser la desinformació amb la pandèmia, jo feia el símil entre viralitat i virus, perquè els virus tenen la mateixa capacitat de propagació que la viralitat, i no sé si en el mateix grau de toxicitat. Però a veure, quan tu parles amb els metges et diuen que hi ha virus i bactèries que ens són necessaris, que són bons, en la línia del que apuntava ara la Carme, que està bé que hi hagi les xarxes socials i siguin capaces de viralitzar discursos que, si no, els mitjans de comunicació no serien capaces d'emetre. Per exemple, se m'acut que el feminisme no seria el mateix si no hi hagués hagut internet. Avui no estaríem en la mateixa situació en relació als drets de les dones si internet no hagués fet el seu paper, és a dir, la viralitat per exemple, del 8M a Espanya, va ser un cas, però que crec que es va escampar a Europa, a Sud-amèrica, de manera molt especial. I, per tant, hi ha viralitats positives i hi ha viralitats que no ho són tants. I davant d'això els metges normalment, quan hi ha virus que no són, doncs el que troben és el retroviral, medicaments i fàrmacs. I aleshores m'agradaria saber si entre les persones que avui estan en aquesta taula rodona se'ls hi acut o creuen que es pot trobar la fórmula, el fàrmac, per poder detectar, primer, la viralitat negativa, la tòxica, que ara apuntàvem, i si hi ha alguna solució, és a dir, si ja comencem a trobar aquest fàrmac, aquesta possible solució, aquest tallafoc, aquests virus que són més tòxics. No sé, Martina?
There is no one single solution. I have to disappoint you here. So it's not like, we're going to invent a pill or a vaccine. We're going to take it and we'll be fine. One of the biggest problems that we face these days with disinformation, especially coming from foreign disinformation actors, is not really what is being said. I mean, disinformation narratives are a problem, but being in my job for over 4 years now, I think I saw everything already. And I feel like most of disinformation narratives, especially coming from Russia or China, they are highly predictable. They evolve, but when you go to this meta level, you actually know what to expect. What is changing constantly, however, is the tactics. So in other words, the ways those malign actors are trying to push their disinformation narratives in the information environment. So right now, we are talking about over 250 different tactics. So you can find them online, you can find them offline, and we're talking about the whole ecosystems of disinformation and of information manipulation, which means it's not only about fake accounts on social media, for example. It's also about different Russian channels, for example, impersonating credible media outlets, as was recently uncovered in France. And we have many more examples. It's also about, for example, forging letters or faking announcements about how Ukraine is going to chase Ukrainian refugees across Europe and force them to join the army, and then use Telegram or other closed discussion groups online to actually advance this narrative. But it's also about using, for example, Russian Orthodox Church in different countries that will repeat exactly the same what you can hear from Putin and from Lavrov. And there are many, many other examples. So my point here is that this part of the problem is constantly evolving. And this is why there is no single pill that we could take and we could just say, okay, we're okay now. We're completely resilient. Disinformation is not going to touch us. It touches really everyone. It's trying to approach us with many different tactics from so many different angles. And this is why the response also needs to be as comprehensive as possible. I want to also go back to this Ministry of Truth idea, which was addressed before. So, as Katarina already mentioned, the idea of response is not to create any kind of Ministry of Truth whatsoever. And the idea is not even to control information, because we can't, honestly. And whatever we think of in terms of solutions, we need to realize, and I'm sorry if this is a disappointment, disinformation will most probably always be with us. What we can do, however, is we can try to limit its impact. And we can try to make it as difficult and as costly as possible for those that disinform to continue doing this. So this is why we put sanctions on, over 10 disinformation outlets that actually have had a major role in inciting to Russia's aggression and justifying the aggression against Ukraine. This is why there are over 60 people on EU sanctions lists right now that have a direct connection to this kind of disinformation. But this is also why we are investing so much in building societal resilience. So we do trainings, for example, for civil society organizations and for journalists so that they can have the tools to defend themselves against disinformation, and then they go back to their own communities and spread the knowledge. So this is really, and maybe I'll give you a more specific example of how it really works, what our thinking is here. EU versus Disinfo project, which I hope is known to at least some of you there in the room. So this is the first raising awareness project, the first project that is raising awareness about disinformation that has been created in the European Union. It is over 8 years old now. What we do there is, well, yes, raise awareness about disinformation. One of the things that we do is we have a database which is accessible to everyone that has connection to the internet, a database that we update every week with examples of disinformation narratives. So what we do there, we not only say, so this is what the trends, if you like, in disinformation are right now, but we can also show the pattern because the database is in place, has been in place since 2015. We can now say I think somebody asked about Crimea in the previous session. So the lie about Crimea is over 9 years old right now. And we have actually examples of this in our database. However, we're not going to tell anyone that, well, this is the only truth and just take it and ignore everything else. This is about empowering citizens to find out themselves what is the reality and what is not. We can also, and we do this via EU versus Info as well, we can show a really robust body of evidence, not only collected by us, but what is much more important, collected by academia, by think tanks, by investigative journalists, that prove that there is malign intent in disinformation, that there were so many attempts in Europe and elsewhere to manipulate elections with disinformation. And so this is really about telling our citizens there is so much information there. You can really rely on this information and you can make informed decisions based on that. But we're not going to tell anyone what exactly to believe in.
M'ha recordat el que deia ara els metges quan es troben amb la grip, que diuen que muta cada any, que per tant tampoc no en trobaran de vacuna, sinó que cada any hauran de veure quines són les mutacions. Entenc que parlar de mutacions també en la viralitat de la propagació de la desinformació. Per tant, encara pren més cos aquest paral·lelisme entre la viralitat i el virus. En aquest sentit, més enllà de les mentides, o del que anomenem fake news o la postveritat, hi ha un element que jo crec que és important. Abans la Carme parlava de les fronteres difuses, per exemple, de l'entreteniment i la informació. Hi ha molts teòrics que parlen que en comunicació tot comunica, qualsevol expressió, les expressions artístiques en la ficció també. I en moltes ocasions les mentides explícites, estan basades en una configuració prèvia de climes que em dirien pròxims a la falsedat, és a dir, d'atmosferes que ens fan creure o que ens fan prendre consciència en relació a unes premisses que poden ser més o menys veritables. Abans la vicepresidenta parlava de com s'estigmatitzava els jueus a Alemanya. Això es pot fer a través de la informació, però es pot fer a través de la ficció. A Europa en aquests moments hi ha un debat intens sobre la immigració i en surten moltes dades sobre la immigració, però també hi ha una ficció que estigmatitza els immigrants situant-los en uns papers determinats, en uns rols determinats, que després fan creïble que aquestes informacions quallin en la ciutadania i que la ciutadania acabi tenint la impressió que aquelles informacions que poden no ser veritables en relació a la immigració tenen una raó de ser, perquè la ficció ha creat un cos de consciència en relació a aquesta visió que tenim sobre la immigració. I no sé si en relació a aquesta qüestió, per exemple, la Caterina ens pot parlar de si també s'indaga sobre aquesta creació de climes que fan després molt més factible la propagació de la mentida.
Well, Vice President and my fellow speakers have spoken about the importance of social media, and definitely social media play an important role in dissemination polarizing or false narratives. And one of the reasons why disinformation is so impactful is that it appeals on emotions. Facts and truth can be sometimes lie. Information operations or propaganda is actually the battle for hearts and minds of people. So throwing data on people doesn't work. People remember stories. They don't remember data. So we ourselves need to learn how to tell stories, because the disinformation actors or people who spread conspiracy theories are very good in creative and emotional, usually negative images that, I don't know, there was in Germany, there was this famous Lisa case where alleged young girl was supposed to be misused by migrants, and that was completely, not fake. It was completely fake. It was blown out of proportions, and in the beginning, the public institutions didn't react on it because they knew that it was not truthful. But then it got viral on social media, and then later on, days later, the public institutions started to address it. So what I wanted to say was that we need to learn how to tell stories, and we need to proactively communicate certain things. Like my country, there have been lots of disinformation spread by migrants, but we are not a country where actually migrants want to live, and we're not the final destination country. And Slovakia has belonged for years into the EU countries that have provided lowest numbers of asylums in the whole European Union. But that topic of migrants has been misused by political leaders within their fight for the votes of the votes of the voters during the electoral campaign. So one thing that we should request from social media is to promote truth and fact-based information during their algorithms, because as Carmen said, we're living in algorithm-induced, let's say, reality, or algorithm-mediated sphere. We need to create our own stories and showcase the reality through personal stories. We have migrants in Slovakia, refugees, Ukraine refugees. And if we explain people the reality that we actually need them, and we do need them, not only within society now, but in future, if we explain people how beneficial the migrants can be to our society, to our economy, that already depoliticizes the narratives. If you can show the people in a good light. We need to be much more stricter and faster in taking down disinformation and reacting to false narratives. For example, social media platforms need to invest in bigger amounts of people in content moderators. Slovakia has had for several years now one official Facebook fact checker covering 3.5 million Facebook users, and one person cannot fact check over 1,800 disinformation actors on Facebook and Instagram. So we need dedicated teams. We need dedicated content moderators who speak the local languages and who will be able to grasp and stop the viral conspiracy theories and disinformation before they eventually become viral. I would like to also talk about because that was also mentioned during the previous panel, like prohibiting a certain media. And this is something that Martina was mentioning, but there's a big difference between journalists, and there's a big difference between people, pseudo-journalists, or people who write for disinformation outlets. Nobody wants to ban people from voicing their opinions. But if an outlet belongs to a state apparatus that is funded, like Russia has in the past year spent annually over $1 billion US to spread disinformation and propaganda, then you cannot believe that that outlet or that author is independent and in his best interest is to provide news and provide different opinions on certain things. That is a person who's taking part, or that outlet is part of the system that is manipulating the news itself and is creating certain narratives. So we need to make big difference between this, because disinformation is spread on social media, is spread on various different outlets. And not only these actors have a certain agenda, but also social media platforms themselves, they're earning a lot of money from these disinformation, polarizing narratives being spread in our information spheres and societies. So I'll just end here.
És interessant un concepte que acabem d'escoltar, que és que la ciutadania recorda més les narratives que no per les dades. I, curiosament, el que s'està fent, i aquí m'adreço a tu, Carme, és que per combatre la desinformació tenim una mena de grups de periodistes, s'entén, independents, que són verificadors de dades, que, entre altres coses, demostren el fracàs del periodisme, perquè si els periodistes estem controlats per verificadors vol dir que no fem la nostra feina, i s'ha dit que nosaltres, els periodistes, no som verificadors. Però més enllà d'això, fins a quin punt el periodisme, en comptes d'estar verificant dades, que és el que estem fent ara per demostrar la nostra independència i el rigor i aquest dret de la informació del que parlaven, no hauria d'estar treballant més en aquesta solució des del punt de vista de crear narratives, de crear relats, que puguin combatre els relats nocius que s'apuntaven ara en les dues anteriors intervencions.
Bé, no sé fins a quin punt el periodisme ha de crear relats. El periodisme ha d'informar, no? Ha de donar dades i ha d'explicar fets. Però, en canvi, sí que, i és una idea que ha repetit diverses vegades la Caterina, la necessitat de comunicació estratègica per part de les institucions europees, i per mi això sí que marca un abans i un després, o marca clarament l'evolució que ha fet la pròpia institució o les pròpies institucions europees en l'aproximació a la desinformació, quan se n'han adonat que no es pot fiar tot al control del contingut o a la desinformació com a tal, sinó, i ho explicava molt bé també la Martina, a la capacitat, a la viralització de la desinformació, perquè si tu ho fies tot al control del contingut, entres en contradiccions amb la llibertat d'expressió. I aquest és la primera evolució clara. I la segona té molt a veure amb el paper del periodisme, com s'han anat augmentant les respostes, també institucionals, a reforçar el periodisme d'investigació, el suport als verificadors, que no és que tota la solució la tinguin els verificadors o el propi periodisme. Jo crec que és una manera de posar l'accent en què hi ha una part de la solució que ha de venir de la societat civil. I això és una responsabilitat del periodisme, però també de l'activisme, la pròpia feina que fan aquestes task force del Servei d'Acció Exterior, per mi també ho explica molt clarament. Hi ha una task force de l'Est que clarament es dedica a monitoritzar la desinformació que arriba de mitjans de procedència russa, però en canvi hi ha una task force que treballa als Balcans Occidentals que el que fa és una feina claríssima d'enfortiment de la societat civil des del convenciment que qualsevol feina de crear consciència de l'efecte que tenen, de l'impacte del discurs d'odi, de la manipulació, de la desinformació, és molt més efectiva si ve des de la pròpia societat civil, des de les pròpies organitzacions i l'activisme que està als Balcans Occidentals. Per mi aquest és un punt molt important, aquesta confrontació entre contingut i viralitat, perquè si una cosa també s'ha evolucionat en aquests últims anys és entendre que la llibertat d'expressió no vol dir llibertat d'amplificació, una mica la posició de la René Di Resta, que és una investigadora en aquests temes, que clarament ha posat l'accent en què el problema no està en la mentida, sobretot perquè la mentida cada vegada és més difícil de tractar des del punt de vista, per exemple, dels verificadors o a l'hora d'assenyalar-la o a l'hora de crear aquesta capacitat de consciència crítica, perquè bona part de la desinformació que circula per les xarxes no és una fabricació inventada al 100%. Moltes vegades és una dada falsa en una veritat o en un relat creïble. Per tant, el que hi ha, sobretot, són mitges veritats que t'obliguen a probablement a explicar una part o a desmentir una part de la informació i no l'altra. Tot això el que crea és una dificultat molt gran a l'hora d'identificar què és mentida, què no és mentida i com adreçar-la. I en canvi sí que es pot ser molt més expeditiu i en aquest sentit van les mesures preses en les institucions europees en aquesta capacitat d'amplificació, en aquestes tàctiques clarament identificades que moltes vegades estan relacionades entre xarxes, com es pot limitar precisament i com es pot portar a les plataformes tecnològiques, i això ho fa també la llei de serveis digitals, amb més transparència sobre com s'estan limitant la propaganda, per exemple, els anuncis durant períodes electorals o fins i tot quin algoritme es fa servir per identificar o per decidir quin contingut es manté i quin contingut s'extreu de les xarxes.
Sí, perdó, i continuo amb tu. És a dir, jo quan parlava de creació de relats és perquè tots sabem que en la informació, i els que ens hem dedicat al periodisme ho sabem molt bé, el primer element que posem sobre la taula és la selecció dels temes, i això és creació de narrativa. És a dir, tu pots parlar dels migrants en relació als efectes positius que generen. Per exemple, es diu que Europa necessitarà en el futur 70 milions de persones que puguin treballar en l'espai europeu perquè es necessitarà mà d'obra, o pots agafar la selecció del tema en funció d'una sèrie de delictes que situes en l'òrbita ja no de la desigualtat, sinó en funció del color de pell o de l'origen de les persones. Això em referia a la creació de narratives.
El que passa és que l'agenda setting ha existit sempre, ja és prèvia a les xarxes socials, i en canvi em sembla molt interessant tenir clar que no és només el problema de selecció de notícies, és també la identificació, i ho ha dit la Martina, crec, al principi de tot, la identificació de les vulnerabilitats pròpies. És a dir, que és molt important tenir primer de tot present que la desinformació no es propaga sobre el buit, sobre terra erma, que moltes vegades el discurs d'odi el que fa és identificar les vulnerabilitats, identificar quines comunitats són més vulnerables i atiar el discurs d'odi contra determinades comunitats. Abans ha sortit també en les preguntes de la sessió anterior i tenim casos claríssims, per exemple, de com s'utilitzen les xarxes socials o s'ha utilitzat les xarxes socials contra els rohingyes, com es manipula, com hi va haver també manipulació d'activistes afroamericans durant la campanya de Trump el 2016 per atiar també l'odi entre comunitats. Per tant, no és només com ho explicarem, sinó com som conscients de quines són les febleses socials com a societat, com a societats democràtiques. No es tracta només d'actuar sobre la desinformació, sinó d'actuar sobre aquelles desigualtats o aquelles vulnerabilitats que també ens poden fer molt més proclius a que determinats discursos entrin en força, i aquí jo crec que l'exemple del discurs antiimigració també hi encaixa perfectament.
Sí, ho deia perquè abans, Carme, has dit no tot ho podem fiar als periodistes, ho fiem a la societat civil, però fixem-nos si diguéssim que la salut no la podem fiar als metges, sinó que l'hem de fiar a la societat civil. No se'ns acudiria, no? Els metges són els prescriptors de la salut i ho tenim claríssim. I per això una mica amb esperit provocatiu, però per què els periodistes no podem ser o no hem de ser com els metges i, per tant, els prescriptors dels relats veritables, allà, aquell element en el qual es pot fiar el ciutadà i la ciutadana com es fia del metge. És a dir, igual que vas al metge quan tens un problema de salut i no se t'acut bé, també hi ha teories conspiratòries contra els metges i els laboratoris farmacèutics, però més o menys està assumit que el metge és el prescriptor de la salut i que, per tant, quan tenim un problema, acudim al metge, quan tenim un problema relacionat amb la salut. Amb la informació no passa el mateix amb el periodisme i fins i tot els mateixos periodistes ens discutim si això ha de ser la nostra feina o podem fer caure en altres sectors. I això em servirà per després preguntar què fan les institucions per reforçar el periodisme independent. Però, en principi, aquest dubte, no?
És que jo crec que ningú ha dit que els periodistes no siguin part de la solució. Jo crec que el que estem insistint constantment és que la solució és molt més multifactorial que només el periodisme, no? Que necessita en aquests moments molts més nivells d'intervenció, a part de que els periodistes facin la seva feina, com s'ha de fer.
Exacte, que no sempre la fan. I aquí volia preguntar tant a la Martina com a la Caterina si creuen que des de les institucions europees s'hauria de trobar mecanismes per forçar els governs a respectar la independència del periodisme i a donar suport, abans es parlava de recursos, al periodisme perquè tu pugui treballar amb independència. Ho dic perquè a Espanya hem tingut algun cas d'alguna periodista que ha estat acomiadada quan ha actuat amb independència en contra del govern de qui depenia el mitjà de comunicació en qüestió. No sé si des d'Europa això s'està treballant, és a dir, forçar els governs a garantir la independència, la investigació, és a dir, el paper que hauria de tenir el periodisme. Martina?
Thank you. Well, I believe Vice President Barley already mentioned the European Media Freedom Act, which actually goes into the direction of establishing standards for the media. And I think this is honestly as far as we could go. I'm not sure if this is a translation thing, but what I heard is in the question was about forcing, European institutions forcing, that was the word used, member states to apply particular standards. Well, the EU has never been about forcing anyone. This is a very collaborative process in the EU with member states, with all the institutions, which sometimes takes a long time, but then this is us actually working on solutions this way, hoping that this process will actually make the solutions much more credible and feasible. However, what I also want to say on top of what I just said is that the European Union has actually quite a long history of supporting independent journalism. And one of the examples I want to bring forward is the EDMO network, which is a network that has been in place for more than 3 years now, I believe. In almost every member state, EU member states, there is a cooperation between academia and journalism, which is about, for example, fact-checking, but also raising awareness about disinformation, providing trainings. And the idea here is that the European Commission is the provider of funds for this. However, the EDMOs, so to speak, in each country or each region are completely independent. And they have the audiences in their own countries, their own communities, to which they can talk in their own language. And so this is one of the examples of how independent journalism, and not only journalism, also fact-checking, and which is very close, obviously, and further efforts to combat disinformation are being supported. But when we look outside of the European Union, we as the European External Action Service, for example, we have quite a long history of supporting independent journalism in the European neighborhood. And this is because we feel that, well, you need to do this in order to fight disinformation, given that disinformation is really leaving a huge void, which needs to be filled with credible information, with facts, with reporting. So now that I see, especially after the 24th of February last year, how Ukrainian Stratcom is so successful, I take huge pride in the fact that the European Union has been supporting Ukrainian Stratcom capabilities for many years now. And obviously, we can't take any credit for the fact how good the Ukrainian Stratcom is. It's their work. It's their success. Nevertheless, we have seen the necessity to do just that, to support this kind of effort already years ago, and now it bears fruit. And the same could be said about Moldova, for example, but also about Russian independent journalism. My point here really is that the European Union really realizes that there is no fighting of disinformation without independent journalism, and we also have different measures in place to do exactly that.
Si no sé, Caterina, si creu que a la societat civil hi ha aquesta consciència, que una de les solucions podria ser això, un periodisme independent, que entenc que dins d'Europa aquesta consciència deu ser bastant diferent, no?, en funció del país.
Yes, of course. I mean, Slovakia borders Poland and Hungary, and as it was mentioned by the Vice President, we cannot really talk about independent and free media in Hungary. I mean, it's a very state-captured environment where investigative independent journalists were spied on and were being investigative. Yes, as Karma said, there are different levels of independence of media environment from one country to one country. So setting unified rules at the EU level and have them being then transposed on member states is very, very difficult. And as Martina pointed out, nobody eventually, wants to do that. Nobody wants to force member states to adopt certain rules, but at the same time, we need to have certain standards in place that are enforcing transparency of ownership, that are providing more security to investigative journalists. I'm coming from Slovakia, where investigative journalist, along with his fiancée, was shot dead for his work. And the investigations and the court on the alleged people that ordered the hit is still ongoing. So we need to provide protection, whether it's cybersecurity, but also personal security to people that are conducting investigative journalism, because they are really providing a very important role for our societies. It's like sometimes a lot of investigations are done by civil society organizations or investigative centers, so they do not fall in the category of journalists. But at the same time, journalists oftentimes cooperate with civil society organizations. So it's a network that is fluent and that is very much collaborative, and saying that we need to provide certain rules to journalists while omitting civil society organization is a bit limiting, while at the same time talking about the protection to journalists without talking about the protection provided to civil society organization, especially in certain countries, is also limiting. So it's very hard to talk about commonalities because our information spheres, our media landscape are very, very, very different.
Bé, crec que han quedat prou clares les exposicions, però com que és una percepció subjectiva, obro el torn de preguntes en el qual podeu participar, tant les persones que sou aquí com les persones que estan en línia, i fer preguntes a les tres persones que ens han exposat aquesta realitat de la desinformació, possibles solucions i sobretot la sintomatologia. No sé si hi ha preguntes a la sala. Anem doncs primer a les en línia.
Hello, good morning. Thank you very much for your interventions. As you know, this course is also followed online, and there are people in the chat who is asking questions. One of the questions that have been formulated is why the EU does not go on the offensive when it comes to disinformation, as a deterrent method to those who promote disinformation within the EU. Then there are also questions about the digital alliances that the EU has established with Latin America, how this initiative is going, and what is the knowledge that can be transferred to to Latin America, and there was also a question about the conditionality that comes with the global gateway when it comes to connectivity, 5G, and all this, when China does not demand this conditionality, no? How the global gateway can be an alternative to the Belt and Road Initiative. Thank you.
Bé, hi ha 3 preguntes sobre la taula. No sé qui pot respondre la primera. El combat de la Unió Europea contra la desinformació. No sé si Martina, Carina.
I'm happy to take it. Okay, maybe Katarina will have thoughts as well. Coming from an EU institution, my perspective is that I very much agree that we have not been enough on the offensive. However, I can also see, and as mentioned before, I've been in this job for a few years now, so I see very significant evolution. I started noticing it and being part of it really in 2020 when we witnessed the COVID pandemic. A lot has changed already then, but really with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the awareness of disinformation and also the, let's say, courage to be much more out there with our own narrative in the information environment has changed really, really significantly, and I can't underline this enough. So if you look at EU versus info, we have always been quite courageous and quite, investing in this kind of in-your-face communications. We sometimes confront Russian MFA directly in our social media, for example. The project is not really what you would expect from an official EU communication outlet, and we're not the project is not the official communication outlet, but this actually gives us much more leeway, much more space to be courageous and confrontational if we see the need to do exactly that. But this is an EU project, so I think this is an example of really being brave out there and also on the offense more, especially when it comes to EU support towards Ukraine. And our delegations worldwide really have been communicating about this and have been much more out there ever since Russia invaded Ukraine again. That said, I do believe that we could do so much more, especially outside of Europe, especially when it comes to talking to our African partners or partners in Latin America. I think so much more work needs to be done in order to occupy the information space is the way we usually call it. Because one thing that we can see from line actors as Russia, such as Russia and China, is that they are everywhere with their information manipulation tactics. And so obviously my message here is not that we should do as they do. However, we should be much more proactive and invest so much more in being present in many more spaces with our own narrative. And also I feel that the European Union is sometimes not courageous enough in just being proud of its own achievements. And I don't want to say that, we should just be proud and just, sit back and relax because the job is done. It will probably never be done entirely. Nevertheless, our work on the rule of law, our work on the human rights worldwide, our work also on disinformation and information manipulation with a system that is really unique. There is no such system anywhere else in the world. We could promote it so much more and be proud of what we achieved really in the recent years. Thank you.
No sé, ja ha vinculat en relació a la segona pregunta, que és les relacions amb Amèrica Llatina. No sé si la Caterina, en relació a això, també té alguna cosa a dir en aquesta relació que podem mantenir amb Amèrica Llatina aquests dies, que precisament és protagonista perquè la presidència del Consell Europeu ha donat especial importància a aquestes relacions. En el tema de la desinformació, aquí tenim terreny per recórrer?
Of course. I mean, we still have a lot of things to do with disinformation. As we spoke earlier, we compare it to the flu, and there's no cure for flu because flu is always changing, always developing, and that's what disinformation is about. There are new topics, new narratives being spread, so we cannot sleep, we cannot fall back. We just need to build constantly our societal resilience. But to the first questions, and to support further Martina, certainly things are being done by the European institutions, European Commission, but at the same time, we need to take responsibility for our own resilience. Member states need to do their own homework. And as it is said, the chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And if the member states themselves proactively do not build their own resilience, do not proactively debunk disinformation, adhere to democratic principles, then it's very hard to build the alliance, whether it's the European Union or NATO, stronger when our own partners are eventually undermining the general efforts and are the tools and points of vulnerability. Like several years ago, various experts have been talking about or have characterized Hungary as the Trojan horse of Russia and then China. But with the war in Ukraine, we really saw that there have been various points of vulnerabilities in other Western countries. So doing our own homework and being proactive when it comes to communication, building situational awareness, and proactively cooperating on various platforms, whether it's the European Union, NATO, whether it's the EU Hybrid Center of Excellence, exchange of know-how is the core of good situational awareness and the core of being efficient and effective in countering disinformation, whether at national or EU level. And additional element to this, why does the EU doesn't take same offensive measures is that at the same time, we need to draw a line somewhere, because if we start to use the same measures as are being used, and tools and practices are being used by our adversaries, how different are we then from them? And I believe that we are different, and we have certain rules and principles that we want to adhere to, which limit us to a certain level, but at the same time, they make us stronger. So these are unfortunately the frames that we have to work on. But there are, I think, lots of opportunities for the collaboration, and I'm very grateful that the European Union, that Martina's team, the European External Service are setting frameworks of common methodologies, common actions to be much more effective in taking down disinformation and foreign malign actors, both at member states or at EU level.
Sí, crec, Carme, que tu també, en relació a aquest terreny de cooperació amb altres actors fora de la Unió Europea, volies dir també alguna cosa?
Sí, no sé en quin idioma era la pregunta sobre América Llatina, ya en castellà, pues venga. Sí, yo creo que es importante, se ha dicho perfectamente hasta ahora, que la gobernanza necesita aliados y es verdad que ya existe un Consejo de Comercio y Tecnología entre la Unión Europea y Estados Unidos que ahora se amplía a India. Martín hablaba al principio de Japón y yo la verdad es que quiero insistir en América Latina como uno de los espacios donde hay más capacidad de buscar similitudes, alianzas, sinergias con la Unión Europea. Primero, hay un diplomático español preparando la presidencia precisamente y la cumbre UE-CELAC que se refería a América Latina como el continente más eurocompatible del mundo en estos momentos, ¿no? Y es verdad que si bien China domina la capacidad o la infraestructura de la conectividad en América Latina, creo que la visión sobre la tecnología, la visión sobre el papel de las plataformas tecnológicas, este esfuerzo que ha hecho la Unión Europea para situarse entre esta visión bipolar de la tecnología que representa el modelo Silicon Valley, ¿no?, de capitalismo de vigilancia desregularizado, o el tecnoautoritarismo, ¿no?, esta visión, esta tercera vía europea de una visión más regulada del papel de las plataformas, yo creo que tiene adeptos en América Latina, y por el trabajo que he hecho en estos últimos años allí, claramente he visto, por ejemplo, cómo las iniciativas que ha tomado la Unión Europea, claramente el Código de Prácticas de la Desinformación de 2018-2019, cuando por primera vez se sienta a las plataformas tecnológicas a la mesa y se les obliga a tener una responsabilidad sobre los contenidos que se comparten en las plataformas, ha servido más o menos de inspiración para otros acuerdos bilaterales que se han firmado en determinados países de América Latina con las grandes plataformas. Y de esta manera creo que la Ley de Servicios Digitales, que entrará en vigor en 2024 en la Unión Europea, puede en cierta manera también inspirar una cierta voluntad de regulación del papel de las plataformas, del comportamiento monopolístico de estas plataformas en determinados mercados, y unas obligaciones de transparencia que hasta ahora no existen y que serán y que se tendrán que aplicar, por ejemplo, a nivel europeo con una legislación dura que hasta ahora no existía. Así que sí, insistir en América Latina como una oportunidad para ello.
Sí, no sé si té molt, perquè no he acabat d'entendre la tercera pregunta, però en relació a això que i potser contesta la pregunta, en relació a això que es parlava de la tecnologia, tots sabem que, per exemple, amb la biotecnologia sí que tenim clar que hi ha uns límits ètics en funció no d'allò que és capaç de fer arribar la tecnologia, sinó d'allò que és convenient que hi arribi. No passa el mateix amb les tecnologies relacionades amb la comunicació. Per exemple, es parla molt de la intel·ligència artificial i dels límits d'aquesta intel·ligència artificial, i encara estem a les beceroles d'aquest debat. I la intel·ligència artificial ja actua, ja es comencen a fer diversos continguts amb intel·ligència artificial. I no sé si en relació a l'última pregunta anava en relació a les capacitats que augmentarem de connectivitat i, per tant, de capacitat tecnològica de fer, i fins a quin punt hem de regular o hem de començar a treballar en aquests codis perquè no se'ns desmadri, perquè allò que és possible tecnològicament no ens faci impossible la convivència. Si no sé, sí, Martina, Caterina.
Si voleu, jo dic que I can say something about that, but very briefly, because el que em sembla interessant de la llei d'intel·ligència artificial, per exemple, que ja està discutint-se a nivell europeu, és que el que em sembla interessant és l'aproximació que s'ha buscat en aquesta llei d'intel·ligència artificial, perquè el primer repte és com regules una tecnologia que està en constant evolució. I aleshores el que ha fet la Unió Europea en aquest sentit ha estat no tant entrar a regular la tecnologia, sinó a regular els usos de la tecnologia. És a dir, el que ha fet la Unió Europea en aquest cas és marcar línies vermelles de quin ús de la intel·ligència artificial no és admissible, es considera de màxim risc a nivell europeu, per exemple, el reconeixement facial en temps real en llocs públics. Això es considera d'alt risc i, per tant, prohibit a la Unió Europea. I això, com a mínim, mentre la pròpia tecnologia es va desenvolupant i, com hem dit diverses vegades aquest matí, inevitablement la resposta reguladora sempre és reactiva, sempre va a posteriori, com a mínim sí que s'han marcat unes línies vermelles sobre els usos, i en aquest sentit em sembla interessant per intentar crear un primer marc normatiu. No sé si la Martina o la Caterina volen dir alguna cosa més sobre això.
No? Doncs crec que hi havia alguna pregunta a la sala.
Gràcies. Bueno, ja heu respost una mica a la pregunta, però era sobretot preguntar sobre si hi havia alguna espècie de regulació sobre el tema de la intel·ligència artificial en aquest àmbit i quin creieu que hauria de ser el seu abast com perquè sigui més una eina que beneficiï i no pas perjudiqui els usuaris. Gràcies.
Sí, no sé si... n'hi ha una altra, perfecte.
Sí, hola, buenos días. Me van a permitir hacer la pregunta en castellano. Me ha encantado de Carmen Colomina que ha hecho usted referencia a la sociedad civil. La sociedad civil, digamos, desde muchos años atrás, no hay que ver nada más que, por ejemplo, la sociedad americana, desde Martin Luther King, los derechos sociales, la impulsión de los derechos de los usuarios de la sanidad, la propia ética en el mundo de la sanidad. Yo soy sanitario, por eso lo comento. Pues la sociedad civil tiene una importancia extraordinaria, ¿no? Ahora que se está haciendo la ley de servicios digitales en Europa, que todavía pues, hay poco consenso, tengo entendido, hay muchos factores que la delimitan, quisiera, en fin, dar mi opinión de que la cuestión de la sociedad civil es una cuestión que me da impresión desde fuera, que la Unión Europea, el Parlamento Europeo, trata de impulsarla de forma proactiva, pero los medios de comunicación no se hacen eco de ello. Entonces, en Europa tenemos quizá un pequeño defecto, algo todavía que salvar, que es promover de forma proactiva desde los medios de comunicación, ya no solamente públicos, sino especialmente los privados, este impulso de la sociedad civil, porque yo estoy convencido que es el futuro de muchos de los problemas sociales, laborales, económicos, sanitarios que hay en Europa y que hoy en día se ven. El cáncer, por ejemplo, es uno de ellos. Y perdón, gracias.
No sé si hi ha alguna pregunta més a la sala. No? Sí, allà n'hi ha una.
Hola, potser s'ha dit, el que passa que he arribat tard i no ho puc saber, però volia preguntar una mica de cara a les eleccions europees del 24, que lògicament serà un moment interessant per tota la desinformació o informació malintencionada que pugui sortir. Llavors volia preguntar si efectivament a nivell de les institucions europees i des de les institucions europees a la societat civil, que això és un reclam que el Parlament Europeu ens va fer a institucions que treballem sobre Europa en clau local, si hi ha eines per ajudar-nos a propagar, diguéssim, accions o maneres per detectar desinformació o per alertar la ciutadania sobre discursos que no siguin, diguéssim, positius. Gràcies.
No hi ha més preguntes a la sala? Doncs bé, molt ràpidament, la primera pregunta era sobre els límits de la intel·ligència artificial. Com s'ha dit aquí, ja hi ha un primer projecte a la Unió Europea que està, si no vaig errat, en tramitació parlamentària, la llei d'intel·ligència artificial que, com apuntava la Carme, el que ha posat és un codi ètic de l'ús de la intel·ligència artificial. Però no sé si tant la Caterina com la Martina ens poden respondre a fins a quin punt, des del punt de vista de la comunicació estratègica, s'han de dissenyar també estratègies per fer front a tots aquells elements comunicatius que es puguin treballar amb la intel·ligència artificial i que acabin sent disruptius en els discursos polítics, en els discursos socials.
Okay, so I will maybe tackle this partially, and then I can also respond to the question about EU elections, the last one. So when it comes to the AI Act, well, the work is ongoing, so we will have to see how legislators in the EU, what the final outcome of what the final bill will be. But on a more general level, what I would say is, of course, we see AI being used by malign actors to use disinformation, and so this will obviously progress. I mean, it's obvious for me because I could see attempts to use AI already before it became such a hype. It's just the extent of it that is now increasing, and obviously AI makes it possible for disinformation to be even less costly and to be exercised in much more widely. So this is a danger, and the awareness about that needs to be constantly raised, continuously. However, I also think that, well, obviously this will change the way we consume our information, and that the way in which we move around the information environment, if you like. However, I think there will be other developments in the years to come, and so we can't expect the regulation, in whatever form it will come, to solve the problem entirely. The problem of disinformation, and I think we all agreed at this table, at this panel, requires a whole society approach. And so AI in disinformation requires exactly the same approach. There will be something else in the years to come, something that we don't have a name for right now, something that we can't even, conceptualize just yet, but it will come, I'm quite sure. And so the answer to disinformation on an individual level will always be, I think, our own brain, our own capacity to deal with it. So what we need is to understand how it works, how disinformation works, how information manipulation works, how it uses different tools, and then on an individual level, we will be able to defend ourselves if we have this awareness. And so this is, for me, the most important thing always. Whatever the new type, whatever the new exciting tool will be, it will always have two sides. So on the one hand, it is disinformation, and malign actors will always keep trying to use every possibility to keep manipulating us. But on the other hand, I also feel that the AI solutions can make our work on the bright side, so to speak, easier and more effective. So I'm quite hopeful, personally. And as far as the EU elections are concerned, obviously we work on the topic quite intensively, along with other European institutions, European Commission, European Parliament, and as you probably know very well, being in the very room that you are in, there are European Commission representations in every member state, and also the European Parliament representations, which work tirelessly on promoting EU elections and also on raising awareness about disinformation, including around the elections. There will be much more specific products and specific actions as we go, starting from September. So please monitor your local representations and also monitor EU versus Disinfo constantly, because what I think is important to realize is when you look at those malign actors such as Russia, elections are always an important point of reference for them, an important opportunity, if you like, to manipulate and disinform. However, this is just a step for them. It's not the end game. It's a step for them to keep manipulating. So what we saw in 2019, in the previous European elections, for example, was a strategy that Russia had to discourage people from going to vote. So the general strategy was about people being discouraged, and then if the strategy was successful, Russia could then say, well, nobody cares about the elections. Those institutions, those people that are then working in the European institutions, they don't have any legitimacy whatsoever, because they were chosen by very few people. Luckily, we had the biggest turnout in European elections history, so the strategy was unsuccessful as far as disinformation is concerned. Nevertheless, it will happen again. I'm not sure just yet what Russia will say and how it will manipulate exactly, but we will work very intensively on making the citizens aware of whatever is to come.
Sí, Caterina, igual t'interpel·lo, crec que amb el tema de la societat civil, perquè ho has apuntat en la teva primera intervenció, fins a quin punt les institucions europees han de ser capaces d'absorbir les aportacions que fa la societat civil, que en molts països es veuen com a dissidència i moltes vegades, en comptes d'entomar les seves aportacions, el que fan és perseguir-les. I també si pots fer un breu apunt sobre com es pot preparar les institucions europees davant de l'allau que hi pot haver de desinformació relacionat amb les eleccions del 2024.
So when it comes to civil society or organizations, I think that the European Union eventually provides a lot of opportunity to civil society organizations and researchers to voice their opinions on legislations, on plan initiatives. We ourselves as an institution, we took part in several commenting processes. I mean, they're all public on EU websites. You see very clearly, what is the line of the debate, what kind of inputs that you would like to, they would like to collect from you, or what kind of concerns do you see in respective member states, countries, etc. And because of our initiatives, we eventually, as an institution, became one of the non-platform signatories of the new Code of Practice on Disinformation. So I don't think that certain voices of civil society organization within EU member states are hushed down. Rather, on the other side, like the European Commission is seeking a lot of inputs from civil society organizations, both within the European Union and beyond it. And we see it through various debates that are being organized, not only within the European Union, but the debates are being brought to Latin America, to African countries, etc. So in this sense, I would say that it's about the civil society organization knowing about the opportunities, knowing how to work with stakeholders both at regional, national, or EU level, and how to join forces. We ourselves have, for example, created several years ago a lines on healthy infosphere because we wanted to bring out the problems that the civil society organizations and journalists were experiencing in Central and Eastern Europe and bring it to the attention of the European Union, where we thought that the debates were a bit more, let's say, Western-centric in the sense that the debate was being led by the big EU member states countries, while the problems of small EU countries were a bit let's say, sign-blind. There's a big difference how big social media platforms approach certain policies depending on, let's say, the size. Like Slovakia has 5 million country. Facebook, Google, they don't care about 5 million market. It's not that's not where they make the money. So by joining forces with civil society organization from the region, we were able to gather data. We were able to gather real examples on where we want the European Union to be much more active and where the EU institutions need to put pressure on civil society social media platforms and request them to act. So the opportunities are there. We ourselves as institutions, but also as a society, need to learn how to use it. I'll pass the floor. Sorry, I'm just running out of the battery. So unless I'll plug in, I'll just disappear. So I need like 30 seconds for me to plug my computer into the charger, and then I can continue. Or please give the floor to Carmen, and I'll be right back. Sorry, I'll turn off the camera for a bit. I'll be back.
D'acord, Caterina, estem d'acord amb l'estalvi energètic, sens dubte. En tot cas, i abans de reprendre amb la pregunta, i si et sembla, aleshores acabarem amb aquesta pregunta, amb la Carme volem acabar amb una conclusió una mica de tot, sobretot amb l'horitzó d'aquest 2024 en què Europa es juga una part de la seva credibilitat democràtica en funció dels resultats que seran també en funció del resultat comunicatiu que siguem capaços de ser exposats com a consumidors, com a ciutadans.
Sí, totalment. Estava pensant ara que precisament crec que va més enllà de la desinformació i té molt a veure amb el debat públic o amb els nivells de toxicitat del debat públic. De fet, des del mateix Parlament Europeu reconeixen que l'actual hemicicle ha estat, o l'actual legislatura, diuen que ha estat un dels parlaments més polítics en la història del Parlament Europeu, precisament per la fragmentació política, perquè per primera vegada en la història les dues grans famílies tradicionals no tenien el 50% més 1 del Parlament i per tant necessitaven allò aliances variables, però també perquè estem fruit de la desinformació o fruit del debat online, hi ha un nivell de polarització molt més alt i, per tant, en la propera campanya a les eleccions europees hi ha debats que s'han polaritzat en el debat públic, des dels feminismes que tu parlaves, però també el canvi climàtic. Cada vegada que hi ha eleccions hi ha més negacionisme, hi ha més teoria conspirativa sobre això. Tot això són elements que poden influir en la campanya de les eleccions al Parlament Europeu del 2024 i que tindran molt a veure amb com podem garantir més qualitat de debat públic, de l'esfera pública.
No sé si ja tenim en línia la Caterina per acabar.
Yes, sorry, I had like 5% of my battery on, so I would be really being cut off if I didn't plug my computer. I think that overall, the civil society organizations and fact-checkers and media in EU countries are really preparing for EP elections. Everybody understands their importance. There's a lot of collaboration and coordination already happening, but in upcoming month, it's envisioned. Special working groups are being prepared within the Code of Practice on Disinformation. Special working groups are being prepared within EDMO, within hubs of EDMO. European Fact-Checkers Network is also coordinating its members all across EU member states. The representation of EU Commission in respective countries are also actively monitoring any disinformation on EU topics, and definitely will be monitoring disinformation on EU elections. European External Action Service, EU versus Disinfo, will be a fantastic source of information on what is happening, what kind of disinformation are being spread about European Union and upcoming elections. So there are lots of things that are happening. Everybody understands the importance of it. And we'll see in upcoming months what kind of narratives are going to be disseminated, what will be the dominating topics, whether it's going to be topics of EU prescribing its member states to eat insects, or it will be all about the climate change or different topics. It's very unpredictable. We'll see.
Bé. Doncs moltes gràcies tant a la Martina com a la Caterina com a la Carme per totes les seves aportacions. Crec que ens hem quedat tots amb una visió mínimament optimista. El diagnòstic era bastant xungo, el diagnòstic era complicat, però hem vist que hi ha unes persones que sí, estan treballant per trobar, si no una teràpia com pal·liar els efectes i trobar les millors fórmules perquè també hi hagi uns efectes positius de l'ús de la tecnologia, de les xarxes de comunicació, d'aquesta multiplicació de l'ecosistema comunicatiu. Per tant, jo, si us sembla, ho deixem una mica més tard del que estava previst, amb aquest missatge optimista. Depèn de nosaltres que puguem acabar amb els efectes, si no acabar, pal·liar els efectes nocius de la desinformació. Moltes gràcies.